dump it out.
I'm going to pull up the agenda.
All right, cool. Hey, everybody. I'm Julie Barrett with my buddy Eric Pratt, Mr. Comment on X. We decided we wanted to jump on and do a little live video here with you guys following the initial meeting of the Washington State Domestic Violent Extremism Task Force.
Oh, that's such a good name.
This one really snuck up. So you guys post in the in the chat. Let us know that you're here. If you have observations, questions, if you are watching, let us know. Honestly, Eric, I reached out to you on Tuesday when I was sitting in the restaurant at my hotel in Spokane, looking up something completely unrelated for a presentation I was giving to school board directors on Wednesday. And I literally stumbled upon this piece of information.
In the budget.
I hadn't heard a word about this.
That's perfect. I mean, that's
House
what they
Bill
want.
1333 was like the big bomb that everybody was watching in the last two sessions. And it got the task force got snuck in through the budget.
Yeah. Well, I think that says something. You were supposed to find that, because I would have never seen it. And I don't think I've heard anybody else talk about it. I mean, that's by design on their part, I'm sure.
Their kickoff meeting was this week. And the information that I found was from last spring. So it just, when I so I find the information and then I go digging down the rabbit hole to find more. And I'm like, oh, here's the first meetings on Friday.
Oh, perfect timing for us, honestly. But
it was great because it seems like a lot, at least from what I think we were seeing on X, it looked like a lot of people were watching. A lot of people gave public comment, wrote public comment, and all. I thought it was, the public comment was pretty good. What did you think of the public comment?
I thought it was on point. I thought it was interesting. There was not, didn't catch a single person saying that they supported the work of this task force or anything like that. It was all basically the same thing. People were concerned about the implications constitutionally on free speech and personal privacy and, their own views and other people's views. And I think it was counter to what the task force members wanted. And you could sort of see them melting down a little bit as it kept going, and their flinching and their body language suggested they were a little frustrated that people were saying, hey, this isn't a good thing. I believe everybody was on that page, the public testimony side, that said it was a negative, right? Am I not? Yeah.
So no, that's what I got too.
That was pretty cool.
What we experienced, our CLW team experienced in August at the State Board of Education meeting, there were, and not, I don't know if it was our doing or not, but we had a couple of people there to speak out against making ethnic studies a graduation requirement. And there were a number of other people who weren't necessarily Republicans or conservatives that were also speaking out against it. And then when it came up on the September agenda, the whole public comment was loaded with all of the pro-ethnic studies people. So it wouldn't surprise me if at the January task force meeting, they've got the public comment loaded with a bunch of their people. So I think it's important that that we organize on this and get people to testify and make public comment, and maybe not the same people every time would probably be a good idea.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're probably right. They are definitely organizing. They'll get their people together. They'll put them on lists and mail and talk about it. That's for sure. But
yeah,
we'll have to counter that. But you and I both know that landscape well. It's hard to get people to show up, and I wonder how we can make it easier for people to show up to these things via Zoom or in person.
But I think I know that Lisa Templeton from Informed Choice Washington, she was there. I saw her. She was there in person and gave public comment. They only are allowing 1 minute. So she spent the time to go there in person. And they cut her off, at 1 minute, which is unfortunate, but we're pretty much used to that. I always tell people, skip the pleasantries and go right into the meat of your comment, because
Yes.
you're wasting precious time by, greeting them. I mean, just state your name for the record and get right into it. Do you think people in Washington will be concerned about their name, like going public in speaking against this stuff? Do you think that's a concern?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you put these two things, this in conjunction with the new hate and bias hotline, I mean, you could literally be speaking out against this and have your name falsely accused in this hotline somehow, like within seconds. And I think those two things work in conjunction. And I think it's very realistic for people to be scared of sort of the implications of that. I don't know how to combat that exactly, except to say you got to have a little courage and step up there and speak up as much as you can, safely, respectfully, and just continue speaking out as much as you can.
And I think it's one of those things where the first time you do it is really scary. But if you practice and you keep doing it, it gets less scary. Like the people are coming after you. I mean, in all transparency, and I don't know about you, Eric, maybe because I'm a woman, that I've gotten more of this but because I haven't heard you talk about it. But when I testify against, like 5599 or 1469, I would get threatening emails from people. There would be stuff said on Reddit about me. And that doesn't really, like, I'm not scared by the threats and the harassment. I just kind of, let it go. But I know that that's not everybody. But it is a real thing. I think they're harmless. I think they're big talkers for the most part, because they want to scare you into silence. And that's an important thing for people to remember. So if speaking publicly doesn't jeopardize your job or something like that, you should do, I think your physical safety is okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's by design. If they can scare you from taking part, from before taking part, like their job is done for them. They don't have to deal with what you say or how you say it. They don't have to deal with that. So if they can just prevent you from showing up, that's a win for them. But with the more of us that show up, I think it's important people realize the more of us that do it, the less energy they have to spend on any one of us to in our pushing back. I mean, that's just the nature of any battle that we have to undertake. You have to sort of expose yourself a little bit and have courage and stand with each other, shoulder to shoulder, and take some solace in that you're doing the right thing, and that they're not doing the right thing a lot of times, and you gotta push forward. You gotta have that courage to do it. I think one of the things that I've come to realize is, when I first started doing this, I hate public speaking for the most part. And I'm not I don't like the attention, and I don't look to this as something I want to do. But after I started doing it, something I noticed was I felt better because I knew I was doing something. Even if it was only a 1 minute testimony countering the people in these public meetings, it was something. And there's something to be there's something to be said for doing something and taking that away. And I felt better about my role for my children and their future. I knew that I could look back and say, I spoke up against this bad policy. I spoke out against this bad decision that the state was making. And I can stand proud for that, for my kids and their future, and say, look, we're doing the right thing here. There's something to be said for that.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably, that's why I do it too, is I wanted to not just be reading about it and posting about it on social media. I wanted the people that were making the decisions to hear my voice and hear my concerns, my oppositions. And that's such an important thing for citizens to do. If you guys are watching this task force and you don't like what you see, you have a duty to speak up. If not for yourself, do it for your children or your grandchildren. But we have a duty to speak up. And so I think, you make a good point about sort of that safety in numbers concept. If anything, what we saw today was, if you were speaking out with concerns about this, you were in good company, because so was everybody else. So you wouldn't have been like the lone person in, Washington saying, I don't like this. It was overwhelmingly voices of concern.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. I felt really good.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, this is great. All the public does not approve. Meanwhile, these members of this committee are just sort of withering inside as they hear it. It was good. But
so let's talk about the members, because you and I were kind of digging into who are these people?
Boy, I think the big winner that I took away was Mary Hall, the Thurston County auditor. I thought that to me right there said volumes. It was sort of the typical cast of characters when it comes to local orgs and orgs that surround sort of the known ideology of Western Washington. But Mary Hall, being that she was apparently I hadn't heard of her before, but apparently she's the auditor for Thurston County, and her statements about the upcoming administration, speaking directly, I'm assuming I would take away to the Trump administration. And
Trump was mentioned by other people. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I thought was, that was going to be typical. We knew that was going to be the habit, but the fact that she's the auditor of Thurston County and she came right out and just was openly biased about her beliefs and the role that she keeps in Thurston County should concern a lot of people. Trump is
she would be in charge of the Thurston County elections, right?
I would think so. Yeah. Or if not holding a very big role in how it was handled. And to see that, how biased the person was openly, pretty telling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I thought was interesting was that those two people from Peril, I forget what it stands for now.
I forget her name. Blitz, wasn't it?
There was the rabbi and the other gal, Polarization and Extremism Research and Innovation Lab. And they are from Illinois. And they said in their introductions that they have been contracted. So what that means is they have been paid to be part of this task force using Washington taxpayer dollars. And they're from out of state, which people like to remind me that I'm not from Florida. I'm from Washington and I reside in Florida. And apparently that now makes me irrelevant to Washington issues. And people remind me of that all the time. So if that bothers you that I'm from Florida, you might also want to be bothered about these people from Illinois that are on your task force.
Yeah, directly influencing legislative action about labeling you a violent extremist or hate criminal.
Yeah.
TJ
Martinell from, go ahead.
Oh, I haven't had a chance to see everybody's name on that, but I'm looking forward to going through that list for sure, just to see who's on this task.
Well, it's, I was Googling them during the thing, and I think you were too, because we were kind of going back and forth on DMs. But TJ Martinell from the Center Square tipped me off about the Seth, I forget his last name, but he's from Peril, and he's a rabbi, but he doesn't want you to call him rabbi. He just wants you to call him Seth, and his pronouns are he, him. And he was actually removed from the synagogue because he created a hostile work environment.
Nice.
And here he's going to be the anti-hate guy. What's that?
Yeah. I'm so glad Washington chose to contract him for a violent extremism and hate input, legislative input. I'm being
I think
facetious.
that would be a worthwhile public comment for someone to bring up in January. Like, why is this person on our task force?
100%. Yeah. I think there's probably room to address a lot of the people on that task force and their open bias as far as its effectiveness in government legislation, where we're supposed to be representing and governing the entire body. They are really hyper focused on just one type of extremism.
Right.
Yeah.
It's white supremacy is really what they're white
Yeah.
supremacy,
Yeah.
conservatives. The other person from Peril, her name is Cynthia. I forget the last name, but she wrote that book about hate, and you found that article about her.
Yeah, she seemed to be pretty openly biased as well in a one targeted direction. I mean, it's safe to presume that pretty much everybody on that agenda is going to have that bias, I guess you could say. I
thought it was
don't recall
interesting
hearing
that
one person address this, except for the members of the public, address the fact that, other violent extremist groups have taken over places in Seattle,
yeah.
or stopped the flow of traffic and stopped the freedom and movement of people through in their business day to day. I don't recall any incidences in the past 4 years, 5 years, or at all, to be honest, where white supremacists have shut down, entire city blocks of a major metropolitan area, or blocked the movement of people through on their way to doctor's appointments and weddings and that sort of stuff. So I will look forward to the task force bringing those out so that I can check them out myself. Hopefully they'll do that for the Antifa and some of the other things that have happened as well.
Well, don't hold
But
your breath on that.
I don't plan on it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Do we know when the list of people is going to come out? Like who the members of the task force are? I haven't seen it.
I don't know. So let me backtrack just a little bit. As I was digging into this, I also found out that the hate crimes hotline people had their first meeting on Wednesday. And I didn't catch that until yesterday. So it was after the fact. I tried to look and see if there was a video available, but I didn't find one. I'll keep looking for that. Maybe it just hasn't been uploaded yet to TVW. They don't have, I'm waiting for their minutes as well. But what I did find was minutes for the AI task force, which was like October 29th was their last meeting. And they have minutes up, and the minutes show you the roll call, like who's in attendance. So that should have all the members, because I believe they were all in attendance today. And there was like 30 some members. I thought it was like 31 or 32. Do you remember the number they said?
The gentleman from the Attorney General's office who was given the presentation about the public meetings rules, I think he had said in order to have a quorum, they needed 17, which at minimum, which suggested, I think 31, maybe it was 16, okay. Maybe it was 16. So I think it was 31 was the final membership.
That's a big group. And, I don't know if anyone else realized this, but I happened to notice there was no Republican legislators represented there. Nobody from any like Christian, any what you would consider on the right groups. We're not surprised. Nobody is surprised. That is by design. We didn't expect it, but it is worthwhile to point out. Those are the kinds of things that you can point out in public comment about the groups that have been excluded from this task force and that aren't represented on the task force. I think those are important things to make public comment, because the other thing that with the important piece of public comment is the media will go through the records and pull from public comment and push that out in their articles. So it's good to have those voices going out to the citizens, because then your other citizens can read in the Seattle Times that, Joe, I forget his last name, Joe brought up the fact that, there's all this anti-Semitism going on at the UW, and, he hopes that the task force will address that. Those are really good things that will get out into the public. And, when you have this leftist media, you need to have those kinds of comments on the record.
Yeah. Well, it will be interesting to see what comes of this now that we've had our sort of opening, the opening of this. I think people will be paying more and more attention to this one than some of the others. I'm curious.
Yeah, this one, the first half was kind of the most interesting, was when they were introducing themselves. That was really eye-opening, I think, for people in the public comment. This was a lot of, I would say, kind of housekeeping stuff that probably most citizens got a little bit bored with. But I would encourage people, even if you got bored today, please keep going. Please keep attending these meetings, because you will want to know what they're talking about and the ideas that they're proposing. And it looks like the first recommendations are going to be due to be delivered to the governor, which will be Bob Ferguson, in June. So that's not long.
Nope. When was their next meeting? January 10th, I want to say. Something
like that. Yeah. I know they're meeting every other month. So it'll be January, March, May, and then they'll deliver their initial recommendations in June.
So after this first session of this biennium, so it'll be the results. If they've produced a product by then, the results will be seen by the 2026 legislative session, correct? Would that be about right?
Yeah, I'm guessing the reason that Ferguson wants their initial report in June is so that they can prepare legislation for January of 2026.
Yeah, right. So they've got some time in front of them to refine their product and figure out a way to implement this.
Yep. And the hate crimes pilot goes into effect in January. And I believe they also have a June deadline to report kind of their initial results from the pilot. So you've got kind of these two task forces that are doing complementary work. Yeah. That I believe there's going to be some kind of merging or collaboration between these two ideas into what will be public policy, which will be state law.
Right. So we can anticipate 2026 having the results of this be right in the laps of Washington state citizens.
And that's why it's really important for citizens to be really engaged. And I know a lot of, I see on, social media, a lot of people are, Trump's going to, send in these people, or Trump's going to do this, Trump's going to do that. Right. Guys, I would love to believe that's true, but you need to fight like Trump's not going to do anything. I hope he does, but you need to fight like he probably isn't going to. You just need to fight this hard. You need to be loud.
Well, if it took, and you are probably the most engaged person that I know, by far, even multiple levels above even what I do. But if it took sort of a accidental, circumstantial discovery of something like this, we need all eyes on board, because this should have been caught the moment this budget was passed. Right. Coming out of it. What did you say? That was something like 900 pages long budget, and this one little item, it could be pretty transformative to everybody's way of life inside of Washington. So we need all eyes on this, not just Trump's help from the federal government, right, but every individual's viewing this. I got a question, and I didn't go back and look, but it would appear this was a result of ESSB 5950 was the bill, the budget.
Yeah, that's the budget.
I wonder if it's worth sort of asking some of the Republicans who voted for this budget if they saw this, and if anything was ever discovered during their session, the meetings about it, and if anybody supported this. I don't
Yeah.
recall, but I wasn't paying attention. Did they try and get this taken out of the budget, or did anybody say, "Okay, let's do this"? I wonder what made
Uh,
this occur all of a sudden, and
I
why didn't we talk
looked
about it?
at, I'm kind of pulling it up side by side here. I looked uh, at, no, I don't want to do that. Okay, was looking through the amendments because I was wondering if maybe somebody tried to run an amendment. So I was kind of looking at the ones that were, I go through and I look at, okay, what wasn't adopted. Um, and so far I haven't found where there was an amendment that addressed this. There's so many issues in this. And if you're a person that likes to geek out on where state money is going, this budget seems to be chock full of grants for special like organizations. Like if you search the keywords like LGBTQ youth or something like that, you will come up with all of these different grants that are going to those types of programs. Um, and it's amazing. But oh, that's not what I wanted to do. What I um what I don't understand, I mean, I get that it's a long, it's 900-page budget. But all of these legislators, there's all this legislative staff. Is no one, especially now that you have AI and you could like send Copilot through this document to pull out different things and highlight different things, there's really no excuse why people didn't know exactly what was in it.
Yeah, right. After all of the outcry over 1333, if this were to
Right.
come up, I would have thought that this would have been targeted right out of the gate.
Well, especially in an election year, this would have been a great tool to use in election season. If I was a Republican, I would have campaigned on it.
Sure. They've still got their toolkit. It's no
Yeah,
longer a possibility. They still have this toolkit. So
right.
prepare for it.
And if there's any way to stop it, you're going to need to shift the balance of power in the state legislature.
Yeah.
Elect Republicans.
Have you taken and looked with more scrutiny through the budget after seeing this? Did you go and fine tooth comb
Yeah,
it?
I did. I found there was a big $500,000 allotment for a study on gun violence. I sent that over to our friend Michael Easton at Michael Easton Waugh. He posted about it. So they have this projected deficit of what 10 to 12 billion or something like that, and you're spending 500,000 to do a study on gun violence when all of that information is already out there. Why do they need, they're just funding their pet projects. There was over 15 million for abortion.
Just for abortion or buying milfeprazone or whatever?
No,
Or
this was
something?
in addition to the legislation that has passed, the fiscal notes through the policies that passed. This is in addition to that. It's to support providers and patients, and some of it's for Planned Parenthood. A big chunk is for Planned Parenthood.
Great. In the general budget. Perfect.
Yep. Yeah. I was trying to look into the homeless funding. So I just did a search for homeless in the PDF, and there were 359 references for the word homeless. So I'm gonna put Copilot on it and see if I can have Copilot draw out for me the meat of what's going on there with the homeless stuff. But I did notice that the Senate Republicans tweeted about the expenditures on homelessness. And yet all but 4 Republicans in the Senate voted yes on that bill.
So obviously they're probably working in tandem with some of these organizations saying, we'll get you your funding if you get us the support we need politically, or at least you don't attack us politically come the election.
Right.
Yeah.
That could very well be.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think that's what we're seeing here more than anything. For lack of a
And
better
it's not
term,
just in Washington. I mean, this is a
inside the court.
problem with Republicans across the board, even, on a national level. We have a problem with Republicans.
Yeah. 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 Along with the Democrats, it's really a political machinery problem that we're facing as the people. But I mean, again, you and I both know, you go into these meetings, and you see what happens, and they're just operating without any oversight. So there's very little public oversight of what's going on. And if it does start to happen, they re-strategize and restructure what they're doing to exclude that oversight. And it's just a difficult process for us as the public stewards to navigate and work against.
Right.
That being said, I think that Republicans in our Washington state have a harder time, obviously, because they're in the minority. But there's still that sort of political machinery that has to work, or that is working outside the interests of the public itself. So what can you do? Except what we're doing, and hopefully get more people on board to do it.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something, and this is, I think, something both you and I have, maybe even started what we embarked on. I know it did for me. They're really, I don't know if you picked up on this, but they're really going at this domestic extremism and mass violence as a public health issue. I think they use that term on a number of the forums and the things that they generate. And I remember hearing them talk about it a little bit in this introductory meeting.
Yeah.
It really smacks of the same sort of public health issue policies around gun violence. I mean, they are very much using that same wording and that same branding to do what they're doing. Have you noticed that with this particular domestic extremism task force?
Yes. In fact, I pulled up the presentation that the Attorney General's office presented to the committee. I forget which committee, maybe it was state government or something in the House in January of 2023, when they first had the public hearing on House Bill 1333. And in their presentation, they had a graphic about the different kinds of people that they consider extreme. And in one of their little bubbles was the anti-mask, anti-vax people. And I see this, and I know you and I have talked about this during session as we saw some of these bills that were coming through that were like, ooh, this is like setting up for the next like COVID 2.0 kind of situation. I see this framework being part of that. Right.
Yeah.
So the next, when you have COVID 2.0 come through, they've already got the system in place to be able to punish those of you who aren't going to wear masks where and when they tell you to, who are not going to get the jab that they want you to get, or whatever it is, that whatever they want next time. I think this is part of that.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think it's building on those powers they were flexing during COVID, for sure.
And I'm sure you recall that they did not reform the governor's emergency powers.
No, why would they?
And that under Ferguson is a very scary thought.
Sure. Especially when we're labeling. Yeah. I mean, if we can start labeling whatever it is we want as a public health emergency, and then using those powers that were flexed and tested in the public, in the public court of opinion, you could say, as well as in the actual court system, if they can flex those powers without challenge, I mean, what isn't possible? I mean, you could have climate change being used as a public health policy influencing position. We can use gun violence as public health policy influencing positions. And then we can use hate and extremism as a public health policy position. So really, the more and more they can label under the under that public health policy problem or public health problem, their powers get limitless. And then it won't
Well,
be a
and
matter of
who's in charge of public health?
protected.
It's a bureaucrat. It's not an elected official.
Ah, right. So
So they can
Ferguson
give
used to
that
say,
authority to whoever they want.
right?
That's scary.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I think
here's
I
a
made that a few
question.
times. Yeah.
When children are going to public school and, they're talking to their friends about, my mommy does this or my daddy does that. And, thinking of my own kids, my mom goes and testifies, to the legislature, because my girls did, and they were in high school. So it wasn't, so they were, knew what they were saying. But does that then raise a red flag to our activists that are in the education system that then might, and this isn't conspiracy theory because we know that they're doing this. We know that they're targeting people like you and I and people that are, watching us talk right now about this is that to me, that would be a concern is what your kids might say innocently to people at school because it's just what mommy or daddy does. And, maybe it's daddy's a pastor, who knows what it is, but just little things that are going to tip off those activists.
Sure. And what teachers and things, they're mandatory reporting for certain. I think it's more they're more for abusive, what they can label as abusive things, but there's a certain level that they have to report. I don't know how that would play with the public health authority or this, but certainly possible. I mean, with what they're trying to do, absolutely seems
I
plausible.
did notice that one of the people on the task force is part of a children and youth justice organization kind of thing. So, that always raises a red flag for me with those types of people.
Yeah.
So it's something to be really dialed in on and really pay attention to. And, people need to tell their friends and get, I hope that a lot of people tuned into that Zoom meeting and they saw the number of attendees and realized that they're being watched.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe they'll get a little, maybe they will get a little check when they start hearing everybody who signs up for public testimony pushing back. Yeah. I think if we see, I would hope that there's going to be a difference between a political person who serves in the House and the Senate and those meetings versus actual community members. And they are actual community members. I may or may not agree with them, but they're actually community members who are seeing the discourse of the public disagree with them. So perhaps the voice of the dissenting public will have a greater effect in those meetings than it will in the House and Senate legislation meetings. I'm hopeful,
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah. I was a little regretful that I didn't realize that sign up for public comments ended an hour before the meeting. I thought I would just sign in there, raise my hand and be able to do it. But I'll make sure moving forward, I message out on my X as well as sign up in advance because I kept going.
I didn't catch that either. So were you supposed to email them and let them know you wanted to make a public comment?
I don't know. It wasn't exactly clear to me. But it didn't come into play for me. But when you posted it, but I do see on the website it does have something that directs us must register at least 1 hour in advance of the meeting, and it sounds like you got to email. So you have to register with their anti-hate at atgwa.gov. So, yeah.
Good times. Well, is there, we kind of, just for everybody watching, Eric and I were going back and forth as the meeting was going on today, and just decided to kind of hop on a live impromptu afterwards to kind of debrief and chat about it. So we're just riffing here. But Eric, is there anything else you want to add? I think that people will be hearing a lot more from you and I between now and the next meeting.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we covered a lot of good ground. With what was presented in front of us, there's not a lot yet to really chew on as far as what their product is going to be. But I think moving forward, knowing who it is that's driving these task forces is going to be something we can continue to develop a picture of. So,
yep,
yeah,
I agree.
The state of Washington.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and we will definitely keep you up to date on anything we see. If you see anything, let us know. If you want to make public comment, but you just aren't really sure how to go about it, please feel free to DM either, Eric or myself. Either one of us would be happy to help you sort of navigate how that all works, and to, put together your comments if you're not quite sure what to say. We'd be happy to chat with you about that. So thanks for joining us, everybody, and have a fantastic weekend.
Thanks, everybody.